Hey fellow developers, welcome back to Frankly Developing. I'm your host Frank, and today we're doing something different. In this new series, we'll be taking a look at projects on GitHub, analyzing their code, and showing you how to improve it. You can join in on my thought processes, and all the changes will eventually become a pull request. Maybe the repository owner can learn something from it as well. Today we start with something elementary, cleaning up warnings, but not just for the sake of being warning free. By doing so, we will see that it'll address potential problems. And most importantly, it allows us to set up the whole project such that future warnings of that kind don't even come into existence anymore. As you'll see, this series is on one hand going a lot slower, and on the other hand it's much more hands-on. So we'll break it up into smaller videos, each focusing on a certain aspect. If you like the series idea, please subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to follow along. And if you want your repository to be reviewed, leave a link in the comments below. If the series is successful, I might take a closer look at it. Of course, I'm interested to hear from you and how you like this new format. What is particularly interesting to you? What would you like to see more or less of? Let me know in the comments once you watched some. But now, let's get started. I picked some random, more or less, GitHub repository. It's a pretty new one, just a few things that haven't been done yet. It's a monster collector. Generates something with an LLM. Looks like it generates monsters, and then description comes from an AI here. And it's Cohere, which I don't have access to, but that shouldn't matter. And then there's a bit of a description here, so it all looks quite well so far. So let's take a look at the code and what we encounter there. Maybe we can just see if it runs successfully. You can see it's already running. Can make a change probably, something like this, and oh yeah, need to click save. And it seems to be saved, so far so good. Now what you notice is if you rebuild this from scratch, gives you a lot of errors. Yes, these are German, but in the UI you can see they're in English as well here, like a null reference. And glancing over them, there's a lot of nulls in there, which kind of makes you wonder because, oh yeah, indeed, there's a nullable setting already configured. What you normally want to do is combine that with warnings as errors from nullables, in which case, like all of these 17 warnings now become 17 errors, which means all of them are actually about nulls. Quite interesting. And that's also why you want to keep your projects error-free, or warning-free rather. Obviously you have to keep them error-free. But this is not something we can add yet, so let's undo that and see if we can just first do some cleanup to get rid of these. Not too much. So let's start a branch, refactoring. Okay, so let's just do a rebuild and start from the top of the list. So here it says there's a possible null reference. Where are we here? So this is supposed controller, monsters controller, get some post body, which is some prompt that's nullable. And yeah, we'll look back at the application. There's like this additional prompt, which seems to be optional. So that might be our null here. Okay, so you cannot give this in, and then this one is null, which means, yeah, this parameter doesn't accept a null normally. And now the nullable settings is like, this is a problem. You shouldn't do that. You can also quick fix it here with a lot of options. One of them being, I'll change the type of the parameter to nullable, and yeah, lo and behold, it's gone. There's one warning less. But be careful with that. Like what we did here is just add this automatically, which is working on the compiler side. This is already making a big change because when you take a look at this, it used to be an empty string or a null directly, and then it was in there. And well, actually, that's not very nice because now if you pass in a null and you add it like this into the what seems to be like the instructions to the AI, this will give you a literal text null, which is kind of annoying and shouldn't probably be part of that instruction. So in that case, we really want to default it back to an empty string. And also, if you look at this, that doesn't make much sense either. Like, if it's already nullable, then you might as well default it to null instead of an empty string. So there we go, we have our change monster file. That's our first commit for the first error. Well, let's continue and take a look at the next one. Here's one on the audit log. As you can see, we have a list of string nullable, and it's initializing with a list of string non-nullable, which it complains doesn't match. So yes, if we add a question mark here, that makes the warning go away. But you also notice that this is kind of a redundant type. So the other option would be to use the target type new, which basically means, yeah, just create a list of string question mark. Doesn't need any more code than that. So that would be an easier way to also fix the warning. We can see that the same thing applies 3 times here. So if you have something like this, you can apply it to the entire file like that and fix all of them in one go. And if you recompile this, essentially we lose a few errors, but there's one more in the audit log. Apparently the key values doesn't have a proper default. Same thing. It's supposed to be non-null, but it's not given any value. So I guess we can initialize it with an empty string for now, which basically fixes the audit log. So there we go. And the next one is the cohere manager, which, okay, it gets the API key from the environment variable, which of course might fail and give you a nullable. Then we might use an empty string as well and keep working with that one. Then we have the audit manager. And the audit manager gets an audit entry with original value, which is an object of nullable. So this could be null, in which case it's kind of annoying while we still retrieve this list of nullable strings. If this is actually null, you don't get a list with a null, you get an exception here and it just crashes on you. So C# has a nifty operator here, which basically means if it's null, you stay with null. If it's not null, you actually apply the toString method. So that gives us immediately the right thing. Down here, it's the very same problem, so 2 of those. Next up is the database context. And as the name says, this has something to do with the database. So there's an initialization here, which has a conversion. As you can see, there's some serialization and deserialization are going on. And when we serialize something, it's a list of string nullable. So these audit logs we've already seen, they have string nullable elements in there. So you serialize them and then you deserialize them into, oh, well, actually a list of nullable strings. But then the whole deserialized object itself gives you a nullable, and that should probably give you a list of nullable strings, which is more like an empty list. So if it actually returns nothing, might as well give you an empty list of string nullables. The same down here. And of course, we also deserialize the nullable list. Maybe take a look at this later, but this question mark here has a huge impact on the deserialization and the serialization as well on what you get. This might not be the type you really want to use, but for now we just want to get rid of the warnings. So that one fixes everything in the database context. No, it does not. We have some more entries here. So there's some code that looks at, give me the old values from the audit manager. Gives you a list of string nullables again. But now something is odd. Oh yeah, look at this. Again, another list of strings, and it's assigned to all the new values of the audit log, which you already know. So that was a string nullable list. This kind of default doesn't make sense then. Just a question mark missing here to match the exact types. And finally, we have one more here, the monster. This one's a bit more tricky. There's an output which is a nullable, again initialized to something like this. It should probably be a null again. And then the output is used nowhere but overwritten here with whatever this get text delivers. And as you can see, this delivers a question mark nullable string. So it could be null, in which case splitting it throws an exception, which will be caught. And the console write line, well, that's kind of not very helpful. It'll output something like this was null, so that doesn't help us a lot. And in the end, we return the null anyways. So instead of getting a strange console write line, I'll just look for it not doing that stuff if it's null. So if it's not null, we do it. Otherwise, okay. And you can see there's a lot more problems here with splitting, and what if it doesn't have to? There's hard indexing here. So this is kind of a sketchy piece of code that we may want to visit again later when we do a proper refactoring. For now, let's just check if this was the last warning. So we can come back to make our actual first real change and turn this into a hard nullable. So there we go. Now it's building. And the difference now is quite massive for the future. So if we go back to this method and start again where we came from and try to do something like this, well, now we actually get compile errors. Because we know, yeah, there is a piece of code here that might potentially pass in a null, and you're not looking at that and you're not addressing it correctly. So it's much safer having this setting available. That certainly is worth another commit. I hope you enjoyed this new format. We talked a lot about null, nullability, and nullable types. It's important to have a strategy in place to deal with these topics. If you would like to learn more about null handling in general, then you may want to check out this video. Let me know your thoughts on the review. Would you have done something different? Do you agree with my changes? Is there something you want to be covered in more depth? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, have fun developing.